And good evening to you. Thanks for being a part of our Bible study tonight. I know today has been an emotionally draining day for many, and it's been a full day for us as we had the celebration of life service for Judy Keith today, and then many helped in the serving of lunch to the family afterwards. Others of us were also involved in the Bible study, the kids club at Clifton Hills Elementary. Now we come to our Bible study tonight. I know that it's been a tiring day. Thank you so much for making the extra effort to make this a part of it, and I trust it will be a blessing to you. As we begin tonight, I wanted to just kind of mention to you some things. We've been looking at Exodus 34, verse 6, and we've been looking at those individual characteristics of God that are given. There's a video that actually kind of backs up and gives us an overview of verses 6 and 7 and an overview of the characteristics of God in general. And I want to kind of stop tonight, look at that, and then we'll resume next week our looking at the individual characteristics. I think next week it'll be the gracious, that second one that we see in verse 6. But we're going to look at get an overall understanding of these two verses tonight. In doing that, there's something that you're going to see in the video that I wanted to take just a moment and explain to you, give you a little bit. I want you to pay attention to this when it comes time for them to show it to you. In Scripture, there's something that we sometimes look at that's called chiastic structure. That's chiastic, chiastic structure. And basically what that is there is a central thought that you're being brought to. And there are other thoughts on either side of that that seem to parallel each other as they move toward that central thought. And sometimes in the gospel, it will involve chapters bringing you to that central thought. In each of these verses, that structure is used. In verse 6, the central thought is what we'll see as long suffering. They'll use the term slow to anger. And so it's slow to anger, and then you see two characteristics of God on either side of that. Then when you come to verse 7, and I hope I got a lawnmower just started beside me. I hope that this is not going to be too loud or distracting to you as we go through this. In verse 7, it's the phrase, will by no means clear the guilty. That's your central. And on either side of that, there are parallel thoughts outside of those parallel thoughts that bring you to that central theme. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Pay particular note for that in the Bible study tonight as they go through it. So I trust the video will be a blessing to you, and then your discussion time afterwards. And as you do your prayer time, lest I forget at the end of the recording, be sure and as you come to that time, continue to be in prayer for Buddy and the family, not only for today, but in the days ahead. So let's take time to look at the video, and we will, let me see if I can get to my share screen even as I'm talking to you, and we will share that with you. And let's see, share.
The Bible is a collection of many ancient Israelite scrolls, and together they're telling one unified story.
Now, if you look at the second scroll, Exodus, you'll find two important sentences. They're actually so important that they're referenced and re-quoted over 20 more times within the Bible itself.
It must be important. What does it say?
Yahweh, Yahweh, that's God's name, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness.
I can see why it's repeated so often. These attributes of God are really lovely.
And the statement goes on. He maintains loyal love for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he won't declare innocent the guilty. He will bring the iniquities of the fathers upon the children and grandchildren to the third and the fourth.
Okay, hold on. This last part takes a bit of a turn. We're first talking about God's love, and suddenly it's about his judgment on grandkids? So, is God merciful or vengeful?
Yeah, great question. Let's see these words in a larger context by looking at something important in Genesis, the first scroll of the Bible. There, God chooses one family, the Israelites, from among the nations, and he promises that he's going to rescue the whole world through this family somehow.
And Genesis ends with the family of Abraham in Egypt.
Then the book of Exodus begins, and this book has two large movements.
Right, okay, so this first movement of Exodus, God rescues Israel from slavery in Egypt.
And in the second movement, God leads them to Mount Sinai, where they camp out for a year. And God invites this whole nation into a partnership called a covenant, so that they can be shaped by his values and character.
And represent God to all the other nations.
Exactly. Now, this whole Mount Sinai movement in Exodus can be broken up into 4 literary units. First, there's the actual ceremony where the Israelites agree to be God's partners. And God sets up the terms of the relationship, starting with the 10 commandments. The first 2 are,
Don't give your allegiance to other gods, and don't make any idol images of God. Seems simple enough.
after that, God shows Moses detailed blueprints for building this sacred home so that God can come and live among them.
Oh, right, and then comes a really long narrative about the building of that sacred home.
But you missed something. Right in between these sections is the story that has our description about God's character. The story begins with Moses going up on the mountain, writing down the partner agreement, as the Israelites are at the base of the mountain, violating the first 2 commands.
That's ridiculous. They're breaking the covenant vows while the ceremony is still going on.
Yes. And so God is hurt and angry, and he warns Moses that this betrayal will keep on happening. God is ready to call it quits.
But what about his promise to rescue the world through them?
Yeah, exactly. This is what Moses brings up. And so, what is God going to do? Should he end the partnership, which would be fair?
Or will he be faithful to his promise to Abraham and show them mercy?
Yeah, exactly. Now, look back at the words that we began with, and you'll see they're about this very tension between God's mercy and his justice.
Okay, so the statement opens like this: a God compassionate and gracious.
In Hebrew, this line has 3 words that rhyme: El Rahum V'Chanun. And the line overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness matches the first, as it also has 3 Hebrew words: Rav Chesed Ve'emet.
Each of those lines have 2 attributes of God, and they surround a 5th attribute, that God is slow to anger.
Right. Now, that's the first half of this description of God. Then comes the second half. God maintains loyal love for thousands. And how is he going to remain loyal to people who keep rebelling against him? By forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin.
But God's forgiveness doesn't mean people can just do whatever they want.
Right. God's mercy is balanced in what follows. Yet he won't declare innocent the guilty. He'll bring the iniquities of the fathers upon the children and grandchildren to the 3rd and the 4th.
The 3rd and the 4th, what?
Well, it's referring to generations of people who repeat their ancestors' rebellion against God. They'll get what they deserve. But notice, this small number of generations contrasts that massive number up above.
God's loyal love to thousands.
Right. And then check this out. God's forgiveness of iniquity in this line is contrasted with his justice on iniquity in this line.
Okay, and all those lines are surrounding a central line here about God's justice. He will not declare innocent the guilty. So while God is slow to anger, he is also just.
Right. This is the tension that these 2 sentences are exploring. How does a faithful and loyal God deal with such a rebellious people? This is the challenge God faces in this story, and it's the same challenge he faces in the whole biblical story as he works to rescue the world through this family.
With that in mind, we can take a closer look at these 5 attributes that God declares about himself to Moses. A God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness.
And we'll see how each one leads us deeper into the character of God and into the story of the Bible.
Isn't that a good lesson, a good reminder? And so that's what your lesson is about tonight. You've got your discussion notes. Go through that, and I trust it'll be a good time. And as I said earlier, be sure to be in prayer for Buddy for the days ahead. We love you. Trust you have a good evening in each of your discipleship groups, and we'll look forward to be praying for the services on Sunday. Don't forget, tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., we do have our prayer time. We'd love to have you be a part of that. If you need a connection to be able to call in or to get on your computer and join us, please let us know and we'll get that information to you. Good night and have a good Bible study.